Quick warning, the subject matter of these stories may be considered sensitive to some viewers, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. Hey guys, this is my first time that I'm posting on this subreddit, and it's all due to a certain discussion with my bestie yesterday. Let's take it from the start. So, yesterday at night, me and my bestie were chatting and discussing certain topics, primarily horror, as both of us are horror fanatics. She then suddenly asked me a question. Do you recall ever getting an ominous vibe from a person that you just met? And this got me thinking for some time when suddenly a face popped up in my mind. And this was a face that I haven't recalled in the past 3 years, so just visualizing it gave me the creeps. And along with the face came the incident associated with it. This post is regarding that specific incident. And this incident took place when I was in the first year of my college life. Back then, I was just starting my daily journey from my home to the college, which usually consisted of a train and metro ride per round trip. As it was during the initial phase of my college experience, I was not familiar with that many people in my college, and all my new college friends lived afar and nowhere near my daily route. So, I always used to travel alone. Also, being an introvert, I neither had the interest nor the confidence to convert relative strangers into friends. So I was accustomed to traveling alone and minding my own business. One afternoon, while I was returning home via the metro as usual, a guy suddenly approached me with a college-specific question. I was a bit taken aback as it was so sudden, yet I replied as normally and politely as I could to his question. The guy was dressed in normal attire, t-shirt and jeans, and he looked decent as well. He introduced himself as James and said that he was a first-year student of my college as well. Then, he started chatting with me about other matters, and I replied with as much enthusiasm as I could muster at that moment. Nothing in his words or attire was alarming, yet I felt that something was off. The feeling was unexplainable yet unavoidable. After chatting for a bit, he realized that his station was next. So, he went up from his seat and said that he really enjoyed the conversation and he would really like to continue talking with me, so if I could give him my number. I felt really hesitant at first, but I really didn't want to offend the guy, but saying that I was getting a weird vibe from him, and secondly, it somehow felt nice seeing someone this impressed with me on the first meeting itself, it was really stupid on my part. So, I proceeded to give him my real name and number, and we parted ways. After that day, we started chatting by text, and as the days passed, the weird vibes started getting stronger on my part. James started off normal with his texts. Goofy, funny, lighthearted. But as the days passed, he started getting a bit more aggressive with his demands that he wanted to meet up again. Now, before people start having misconceptions, I want to clarify that I am a guy. So, this is a lot more weird for me to experience. He repeatedly started texting that he wants me to come to faraway places so that we can hang out. Now, at first, I was not interested because the places were really far from where I lived, so I used to politely decline, saying I'm really busy right now. But after a point of time, he started asking me about a specific date on which I would be free. I was not really interested in this conversation anymore, so I gave him a random date in the future, and the conversation ended for that day. And wouldn't you know it, when that date actually arrived, I got a text on my phone asking me if I remembered my promise to meet up, with the name of another faraway place and the time when he expects me to arrive there and catch up with him. This was literally the last straw for me, and I blocked his number and also blocked him from Facebook, where he had accidentally found me while scurrying through his newsfeed one day and sent me a friend request. I truly thought this was the end of this story, but no. 3 to 4 days after I blocked him, I was outside the house doing some shopping. I had to walk long distances searching for certain products and items, so I was totally spent after an hour, sweaty and panting a lot, as it was really hot and the sun was scorching. Hence, I decided to rest for some time and was standing on the side of the road. Meanwhile, I noticed that 2 guys were coming towards me from the other side of the road. They looked as if they were searching for something or someone, but were confused as to where they would be able to find it. Seeing me standing there without purpose, they approached me and asked if I knew where XYZ location was. I pointed to the direction where the location was, according to my knowledge, and they seemed happy and content with my answer. I don't know what it is with some people, but they start to get too comfortable and friendly after they complete their agenda. And these guys were no exception. They started asking me my name, where I lived, the name of my college, my size. Okay, they didn't ask about that, but with the amount of information they were already asking me, it didn't seem too far-fetched. They also started sharing stuff about themselves, like how they run a computer learning program, how they were scouting interested applicants, how many hurdles they had to overcome to reach where they are now, etc., etc. After both of them blabbered for many minutes simultaneously, they stopped to gather their breath and asked me for the answers to their questions, which I didn't even get an opportunity to give earlier. If this happened now, I would have given them fake names and an address, but back then, I wasn't careful or worried enough, so I provided them with my real name, my college name, the year in which I'm studying, the area where I lived, etc. After listening to my college name and my year of study, they seemed to have like a eureka moment suddenly. And they stated that one of their longtime students also studies at the same college and is also in his first year. Their student's name was James. I know what you guys are thinking. Maybe it's another person with that same name. It's not that uncommon, but no. It was the same guy. Same name, same surname. It was him, no doubt. My heart sunk after I heard the name. I started sweating profusely. My mind activated the fight or flight response, so I really felt like running away, but I stopped myself because it was a crowded street and running away felt weird. So I just stood there, shocked to my core, unable to speak or listen as the sound of my heart clouded everything. How could this be happening? How is this even possible? This is too absurd and improbable to be a coincidence. All these thoughts were running around in my head as their voices seemed as if playing on in the distance, although they were right there, standing in front of me. A sudden fear then gripped me. What if they call him and ask me to speak to him? What if they say, James's house is nearby, so why don't you come with us to his house? You guys can meet and become friends. And my heart pounded harder and harder, anticipating these 2 questions from their end, but thankfully they did not ask any of them. although they were particularly insistent that I take his number from them. They tried to give me his number many times, but each time I politely refused. So, after a point of time, they thanked me for my help and took their leave, and I took a humongous sigh of relief. The incident ends here, but not necessarily the creepiness. After finishing my story, my bestie remarked that this was one of the scariest stories she's heard in a while, and the fact that it was 2 a.m. then didn't necessarily help to subside the uneasiness. I recalled the story after 3 years, so I've forgotten many details regarding it, but still, certain details crept up in my head while narrating the story. Firstly, in all the years I've been to college, I've never seen that guy again. My college was very strict regarding attendance, so I had to go to college every day, sometimes even 6 times a week. And still, I haven't seen him even once afterwards. Additionally, I've spent a lot of time in the class where apparently he studied, as I had some friends there, and yet not once. Secondly, as I mentioned before, I had blocked this guy from all social media platforms and also blocked his number. And I was relieved to see that the guy was still present in my block list. Otherwise, I would have lost my mind. However, when my bestie tried to search for this guy on those aforementioned platforms, she could not find him. And she searched from top to bottom, and I'm not willing to unblock him to satisfy my curiosity. It's almost been a week since I've had that discussion with my bestie, and both of us are still nowhere near to explaining how any of that was even possible. But I truly know one thing. This is the creepiest thing that has ever happened with me, and I don't think anything will top this in the future. Update. As I said, this all happened 3 years back, so many details are murky, but from time to time, I remember something from that incident and get one step closer to visualizing the entire picture. Just a few minutes back, I found another piece which, although it's not particularly important in the context of the story, but visualizing it creeped the crap out of me. And that was James's smile. He used to outstretch his lips to the max and squint his eyes to the max while smiling, in such a way that a few teeth are always visible. I don't know if I'm looking too much into this, but revisualizing it truly sent a shiver down my spine. And this story is true as well. I've been thinking about all the random scary stuff that I've experienced, and then writing about it. When I was 19 years old, I was fresh out of high school and had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with my life. For some reason, I thought it would be a good idea to go to school to become an EMT, even though I have a weak stomach, and wasn't even sure that I wanted to work in the medical field. Hitting the books, training, and testing wasn't even difficult. It was basic information that would help keep someone alive long enough to get them to the emergency room, and that's really about it. The thing about EMT school, and just about any type of medical training, is that you're required to do clinicals. For us, we had to do 7 ride-along shifts that were 12 hours each, and 2 ER shifts that were 12 hours. Most of my clinical shifts weren't major. Broken toes, elderly falls, and maybe 1 or 2 actual life-threatening situations. I thought it was bad enough when we transported a guy who nearly sawed off his own ring finger while working, but my very last clinical shift gave me nightmares for weeks, and made me decide I never wanted to work in the medical field. That night, I chose to do a shift in the emergency room in East Texas. From 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., I would be basically following nurses around doing random things, such as grabbing them needles, syringes, and so forth. Around 9 p.m., the emergency room got completely hectic and looked just like an episode out of an ER TV show. There was shouting coming from the electronic doors that led out to the ambulance bay. The next thing I know, I'm being told to stay put while 4 EMTs quickly rolled in a man strapped to a gurney. His skin completely burned over 80% of his body. Most of the time, I was told to keep out of the way, but I witnessed everything. His name was Michael, and he was about 30 years old. He was severely burned head to toe. The nurses and trauma doctors worked quickly to save his life. The weird thing was, whenever his stomach was pumped, it was filled with straight gasoline. Another thing is that normally when someone catches on fire, the fabric from their clothes basically melts into their skin. There was no fabric. Nothing had melted to him, which essentially meant that he had to be naked at the time that he had caught on fire. The doctors pumped him full of medication, placed him on a ventilator, performed emergency surgery, and so forth. The entire room was covered in blood, iodine, scalpels, needles, and so on. The floors had bloody shoe prints from everyone frantically moving around and walking through the blood. I can't even begin to describe the smell, but if you can imagine the smell of a burning corpse, that would be it. Once the doctors said there was nothing more they could do, the family was brought in. The mother of this gentleman stated that she knew it was suicide. He'd previously been admitted and hospitalized several times due to mental illness. The only thing we could conclude from there is that he took his clothes off, poured gasoline all over himself, drank it, and then set himself on fire. Once they officially pronounced Michael as dead, I was allowed to enter the room. I was required to put on gloves and a full medical bodysuit. After that, I was required to help lift the body up and position it in various angles, while the crime scene photographers took photos, and the coroners prepared to take the body to the morgue. His eyes were completely white, something that usually happens whenever someone fully passes away. Pieces of skin and blood covered my gloves and shoes. The medical bodysuit I was wearing was covered in it as well. After we were done, I ran into the nearest bathroom and I hurled. This was honestly the most brutal way I've seen someone die. I barely slept, and when I did, I had constant nightmares about Michael. Suicide is tragic enough, but to go out in such a terrible way and to suffer, I can't imagine. My friends and I used to play with a Ouija board when I was around 10 to 12 years old. Not obsessively, it was just fun to do when we were bored to see what would happen. We probably used it on 10 to 15 occasions before my mom found it in the house and told me to get rid of it, and to stop messing around with that crap. I was unaware of how serious of a concern this had been until she confronted me. So, I have two stories that, what I truly believe, stemmed from using that board. We had taken the board to a neighbor's house one evening, myself and about 6 other kids, while their parents were away. We sat in an upstairs bedroom with the light off, just the bedroom light, and waited to see what would happen. After asking if something was with us, the planchette, or the member moving it, I can't vouch for their motives, slid to yes. A friend immediately asked a provocative follow-up question. I can't remember what, but I recall feeling on edge. nothing happened. I honestly remember feeling this huge weight on my chest waiting for a response, and something seemed wrong. My friend asked the same question again, and immediately a light in the hallway flickered, and his cat sprinted into the bedroom on the fritz, howling loudly and sprinting back out of the room. We all freaked out and put the board away, trying to laugh it off, but I sensed that each member felt the same way that I felt, that something went very wrong. As for this next instance, I've tried to make heads or tails of it for 15 years, trying to rationalize it in some way, but without success. It bothers me to this day, and is something that I've only told a handful of people. This occurred after the board was disposed of, so I was probably 12 or 13. It was a weekend, between 9 and 11 a.m., and I was home alone taking a shower. As I turned off the faucet, I could have sworn that I heard mumbling at a distance, like I'd left the TV on in the living room, which was my first thought. After remembering that I had not been watching TV, I assumed that perhaps some friends had come to the front door, talking amongst themselves while waiting for me to answer. The guest restroom was near an office that had windows by the front door. As I tried to listen closely to associate the sounds, I could have sworn to have heard something whisper my first name, at a decibel that was almost easy to miss. As I processed what I had just heard, a light bulb from a mounted 3-lamp post above the large bathroom mirror fell and shattered across the floor. Shocked, I looked in the mirror screaming as I fumbled my way out of the bathroom, avoiding shards of glass, and ran out the front door with nothing but a towel around my waist. This is when I realized that the living room TV was not on, and that my suspicions about friends waiting at the door were false. I waited outside in my towel for a significant period of time until my mom got home from work, before most kids had cell phones. Over the years, I had wondered why this happened. Maybe an earthquake that I didn't feel, perhaps, but until recently, I'd forgotten about my dealings with the Ouija board. I can't formulate any other explanation in my head, and I don't know whether or not the board had something to do with it. One weekend night in Idaho, my boyfriend at the time and I went to a show in Boise. It was one of my first times driving to Boise, so on our way home late at night, we got lost. We had no idea where we were, so I decided to try and turn around and backtrack. We were at a 4-way stoplight and turned left into this area that looked like a good spot, but it brought us into this weird gated community with nowhere to turn around. So I kept driving. I was thinking I'll just come right out to the other side of the community. The whole thing was really strange, and it just got stranger and stranger as we drove straight through. And the first thing we noticed right away, there were literally no lights on anywhere. Not one house light or street light. It was pitch dark aside from my headlights. The trees kept getting thicker until we couldn't even see the sky. It was dead silent and still. It wasn't even that late yet, like midnight or 1 a.m. As we keep going, I noticed something up ahead. It was a large body on the left side, almost in the middle of this small road. As we get closer and closer to this body, I realize what it is. It is some type of animal standing over another body on the ground. We start kind of freaking out because we have to drive right by this scene to get through. We couldn't turn around because the road was so small, so Knowing that's my only option, I continue, even slower this time. We told ourselves, oh, it's just Mother Nature, circle of life, we're okay. I continue to drive towards it, and I start shaking because, as we get near it, we could see that it was actually huge. Very tall legs. We're freaking out, and I'm trying to be brave as the driver. I have our life in our hands, I think to myself. So, I still continue towards this very, very large animal. As we get closer, I roll my window up. That's how close we are to this animal. I could almost reach out and pet it. I can still picture what happened next. That image will never leave my mind. The animal was even bigger than we thought. Way bigger than a man and taller than a car. And I was staring. I couldn't look away. And my eyes got wide as hell because I couldn't even believe what we saw next. Right as I'm next to it, it lifts its head up from this other body, and I swear to you, with so much thick liquid, pretty sure it was blood, but it was dark, so it looked like a dark, thick liquid, dripping off of its face and mouth, and it smiles at me, with all its bloody, sharp teeth, grinning, and its eyes were just glowing bright white. And like I said, there were no lights anywhere. My headlights were not even the reason for its eyes reflecting like that. I don't even remember how we got home. I don't remember much after that. But I know it was one of the wildest things I have ever seen. And we got home safely, but I still have nightmares of that thing. I'll begin by giving a layout of my room. I promise this is important to understand. The door to my room opens up to a wall on the left. On the right is my desk up against the wall the door is on, with a chair that barely fits underneath. Butting up right against the chair is my bed, and then on the left of the desk is a cabinet. The only way to get to it is to move the chair out of the way. The foot of my bed and to the right of my bed is completely clear, an empty space to walk around. I moved into this apartment when I was around 15, and the only other two people with me are my brother and sister. Each night when I go to sleep, I feel like I'm being watched by someone. A woman, standing in the corner of my room, the corner the door is on. Feeling afraid, I would often leave the door wide open as nothing could fit in the space between the open door and the wall. One night, I was going to sleep with the lights off, and the only lights were the ones emitting from the keyboard on my desk, a green hue that was barely visible. In the pitch-black room, that light was enough for me to see everything around me. I was sleeping on my back when I suddenly woke up to the creaking sound of the chair on my left being pulled away. I was still half asleep, so I tried to make sense of the situation by sitting up. Only then I realized that I couldn't move. The only part of myself that could move was my eyes. The chair continued moving and a sense of dread fell over me. I attempted to scream, but my lungs were dry. The chair continued moving until it came to a sudden stop. I felt so afraid that I closed my eyes, hoping that whatever was moving the chair would disappear. I hoped from the bottom of my heart that I was dreaming, but I wasn't. I felt something brush against my hair, just as I felt a shallow breath down my neck. Shivers went down my spine as I tried my best to move, but nothing was coming of it. I began hyperventilating. I laid there with my eyes closed, too scared to open them to see the horror of what lay ahead of me. This went on for hours, until I was finally able to move. I ran for the lights, flicked them on, and then tried opening the door to my room. And that's when the realization of what had happened fell on me. The room door was locked. The chair was still moved to where I had seen it being pushed to. Nobody had a key to my room except for the key on the inside. So how was this possible? For a few days, I sat and tried to make sense of what happened to no avail. I later talked to my mom about what happened, and she told me she would come over. This wasn't a normal thing for her to do, but I tried to think positively. She entered my room, and as soon as she did, she ran right back out. She came back holding a handful of salt and began sprinkling it around the room. She refused to explain why, but the fear in her eyes spoke volumes. I don't know why she did what she did or why she was so afraid. We don't talk about it. But to this day, at 23 years old, I do not sleep with the door to my room closed. Hey folks, I just remembered another creepy encounter. The same preamble from the previous post I've submitted here applies. I'm not so good at English, being a moron, etc. So, like many other anecdotes, I, 35 female, have in regard to this, I was underage, around 18 I believe, and intoxicated leaving a bar. It's the same bar from the previous post. I think I resided further from the bar than I did in my previous story. Anyways, I'm pretty drunk, walking home in the wee hours, listening to the Misfits or something. Who cares? It was loud. I noticed what I seemed to remember being a large CAA truck. It had a trailer and was quite high off the ground. I'm not sure how many wheels, but it was a bigger truck though. And they're stopped at an intersection and I'm crossing in front of them on the other side of the street. I think nothing of it and continue on my way. I seem to remember the engine revving up, even though the light was still red for them. They pass me, and all is well. I don't feel threatened and my radar is not on at this point. This walk was about 15 minutes sober and around 25 plus minutes intoxicated. It had many turns on many small streets, etc. So, as I'm going along, turning down the odd street here and there, this truck keeps appearing. It's been a while since I recalled this, but I want to say it was at least 3 times before I started to worry. You see, it seemed odd that a truck that size, at that time of the night, it was in a residential area. I ran into the truck near an off-ramp that leads to plausible places that person like that would go, like commercial locations. Much less going exactly where I was going, I suspect that they were circling the blocks and watching to see where I went. So, I go into panic mode and hopping fences, going down alleys and through backyards. I would pop out back on a deserted street and somehow this guy would be there. So I again attempt to do some drunken parkour. You see, I know this neighborhood well, and there are lots of little foot trails and small streets that do not necessarily go in a grid pattern. I was in an easy place to lose someone who doesn't know the neighborhood, in other words. I pop out again after about 10 minutes of dodging and changing locations. The truck's nowhere in sight. What validated that I was being followed, it was another pedestrian that must have been watching the whole debacle. Because as I popped out onto the street the second time, there was a kind stranger who yelled at me, "He went that way." Clearly, this person saw what had been happening, and they saw it as cause for alarm as well. I've spent a good portion of my 4-hour car ride home reading these scary stories, and I finally become bored enough to write out my own. I'm not 100% sure if this is the correct subreddit, but it's not far off. I'll preface this by saying that there is 3 stories to tell, and they might sound far-fetched, but they are 100% true. So, take it as you will. Preface, I'm not religious, but I'm very open-minded. Opinions or thoughts are welcome. Part 1. When I was growing up, my dad's best friend's name was E. He passed away when I was young, but my family kept somewhat in contact with his daughter, J. She's much older than me, married to her husband, B, and they do have a family. I'm not super close with them, but if I saw them in public, I would say hi. He got in some sort of freak accident, and his family had a Facebook page with information and updates on his well-being. Things were looking grim, and I was living with my parents at the time after a crappy breakup. I had a dream, and I don't remember the exact details, but when I woke up in the morning, I knew he had passed away. My mom confirmed he had passed away when I went downstairs for coffee. Part 2. About a year ago, I was dreaming that a serial killer was trying to kill me and my ex and his family at his grandparents' cabin. Out of nowhere, in my dream, I looked over to see my old classmate writing at a desk with a lamp on it. It was a strange dream as I wasn't very close with him, and it really stuck out. And it got stranger because he had committed suicide that night, which I found out in the morning. And 3, this one is less concrete, but still strange. My stepson, Jay, found an axe in our garage that we had never seen before, and he brought it into the house. I told him to get rid of it because it freaked me out, but him being 17, he kept it around. My boyfriend left for work very early in the morning, so I fell back asleep after he left. I didn't sleep very well, and I was scared and felt uneasy in the dream. Something, not distinctive in any way, told me there was a bad omen in my house. I woke up, and I knew it was the axe, and I told Jay once again to get rid of it. I told him about my dream, and he didn't believe me. Later that day, Jay and I were at work and got a phone call that his grandpa had suffered a stroke and was getting airlifted to the hospital. I grew up in a supposititious town. When my dad died, his body disappeared from the hospital, but no one would look for it because they all said he was whisked away by angels or goblins. Never mind the fact that drug addicts here would do anything for a little cash. I always felt like a little community like this would have been more hateful, so the only person I really got close to had been a girl named Angel. Yes, her name fit. Angel was perfect in every way, and as a young gay girl trapped by like-minded people, she made me feel like it was okay to breathe. That was until she was found dead. She'd hung herself in the same tree that we always met at after having come out to her father. Even the funeral director knew that it was a wonder they could tell it was her. My sister was born 4 years after the fact, and had never heard the name Angel slip my lips until recent events. She was playing in the yard while I was working on my laptop when I heard it, laughing. Not hers, though. It sounded like multiple people giggling over a secret that only they knew. It was creepy, so I made her come inside and had her sit with me near my mother's burning candles as I worked, letting her play with crayons and paper. But when I looked at her again, she had drawn a familiar item. Angel's hairpin on this floating figure next to her and me. I was mortified and went to my room until my mom had gotten home, And the entire time, I'll be honest, I cried. I was missing Angel more than ever, and I remember looking for her hoodie that I was given, and I cried myself to sleep, cuddling it. So this was a collection of 8 true, scary stories. Stories of all sorts, all types, all subject matters, and genuinely just terrifying. A huge thank you to everyone who lets me use their stories and or submitted stories to me. It is always appreciated. And a huge thank you to everyone who listened to this point and didn't listen to this point. A huge thank you to everyone who listened to the first 5 seconds and then clicked away. But if you're one of the people who clicked on the video to give it the quote-unquote view and then left, if I may, please don't do that. It actually hurts the video's performance. At least watch the first minute or two. That actually helps a lot more. But anyway, huge thank you to everybody. Always appreciate it. If you really enjoyed the video, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. If you're not new to the channel, welcome back. Hopefully you found my channel again on purpose. Or something. I have to assume it's on purpose at least. Or this video came up and you're up next and you're currently asleep because you watched a Let's Read video and it ended. Any of those things could possibly happen. Either way, hi, how are you? I hope you all have a beautiful night, and I hope I will see you again on the next video. But of course, until then, my friends, sleep well.